those that go through the unique self-emergence process experience more pleasure. So that's what I want to talk about here today is, what a lot of people think when they think about a coaching process, think, well, what do the recipients get out of this program? And if I could summarize it, that would be what I would summarize, is the ability to receive more pleasure in life. But it's probably not what you're thinking, because most of us think of pleasure, we think of, candy bar, right? Casual sex, a lollipop, just sort of these superficial pleasures. But I've been editing this book lately for my teacher, Marc Gafni, and it's all about the levels of pleasure. That there's many levels of pleasure, and so I want to connect that to unique self coaching. And maybe I'll just start with my own personal experience. So, for example, before I went through the unique self coaching or the unique self emergence process, unique self coaching from Claire Molinard, my coach, I would go into certain group settings and I'd get triggered whenever I felt like I didn't belong. Like I would sort of contract, tighten up, and go into this spiral loop of like, oh, I don't belong here, I don't belong here, and then I would escape, or I'd kind of freeze or sort of dissociate in my mind, and then I would kind of avoid that group later on. So I basically avoided the experience, right? Over the course of the unique self-emergence process, what I learned to do was actually, whenever I was triggered, I would be able to sit with that feeling, bring in some more compassion into that feeling, bring in more compassion into my experience, and then uncover the underlying desires, needs, yearnings that kind of give rise to that emotion. And then over time, breathing, allowing that contraction to actually dissolve and sort of fade away. And that would leave me with this experience of just sort of sitting in the essence of my being, right? Sitting in the experience of just being myself. Okay, and when I would do that, I'd be able to feel just kind of the vibration of my body and my heart would be able to expand and open. And not only that, I could actually lean in to that experience again. Instead of run away from that group, I'd actually lean into the group. I'd find my voice, share what I needed to share, and actually contribute to that group, and actually contribute my unique gifts to whatever was needed in that particular group. And then I felt accepted and appreciated and loved in that certain way. And so the pleasure of being able to participate fully in a group, that was an example. And also the pleasure of giving my gifts to that group and to the world around me. I was able to experience in a way that I hadn't been able to prior, because I would get triggered and I'd collapse and I'd escape, right? So the unique self-emergence process actually gives us access to a more kind of welcome interior spaciousness of our own being, so that we can basically be with nearly anything, right? And certainly, I haven't been tested to the fullest, and hopefully none of us have to be tested to the fullest, but to be with nearly any emotion, any feeling, any challenge, because if we trace, this is what Marc often says, if we trace the experience of our reality, whether it's the experience of anything really back to its source, certainly any pleasure back to its source, it's all comes from the one source, right? So let's see, what else do I want to say about this? So let me just share briefly, talk more about pleasure, what I mean by that. So pleasure is actually, let's just say there's six levels of pleasure. We often think of the first level of pleasure, which is physical pleasure. when we, touch, taste, sight, smell, sound, right? All of our five senses. When we're able to, so part of the unique self-emergence process actually gives us more access to physical pleasure, okay? Because depending on, and I won't go into the details right now, but depending on what configuration of masculine and feminine traits or lines and circle qualities within my own being, depending on where they're in shadow or neglected or overemphasized, we actually give practices to the person, and oftentimes they're related to being in the body and experience the pleasures of taste, of food, of being in nature, right? And so this physical pleasure is actually, it's, and then not to mention that the entire program itself is infused with embodiment practices, and we have a daily embodiment practice that actually gives people this feeling of being in the body, right? And when we're in the body, we can feel what the body is experiencing. How many of us walk around all day dissociated, whether because of trauma, some sort of wounds or fears, or just a lifetime of built up contractions and guardedness and armor? Well, the unique self coaching that we offer actually helps people slowly dissolve and open up that armor. And it's not therapy per se, although it is therapeutic, right? So, and when we do that, again, we have more access to what the body has to offer us, the intelligence of the body, and also just the pleasures that we experience in the body. Level 2 pleasure is the pleasure of relationships, affection, love with other people, right? And so something important about pleasure is that it's we know whether it's genuine pleasure. This is really important. There's genuine pleasure and there's pseudo pleasure, and that's an important distinction. So it's not about getting more candy bars, although if you have a good candy bar and you can really enjoy it and receive it fully, and you feel that pleasure and satisfaction um, in a way that doesn't lead to more addiction, then that's actually maybe a good litmus test. In fact, a litmus test for genuine pleasure is that you feel filled up, you feel full, you feel like you're satiated, right? Also, a genuine litmus test for pleasure, all this is from Marc Gafni, is the aftertaste. Does it have a good aftertaste? Does it make you feel good afterwards? Does it leave kind of a hangover or a bad taste in your mouth, or stomach ache or whatever it is, right? And then also, if you look at level 2 pleasure of relationships, we know that the longer we're in a deepening relationship, the more pleasure we get from that relationship. So the clearest example is when people are married for 30 years, but not married in kind of a numb way that, oh, we're just married because we have to be. Think about someone who's been married that that they've been doing the work, and they've been leaning into the process of loving, that they've gone through the heartbreak, and they've woken up again, and they've come closer to their beloved, and forgiven when they've needed to forgive, and giving up being right when they need to give up being right, and um, you know being able to kind of have beginner's mind eyes with their beloved, and to be able to surprise them with something beautiful when they least expect it. All the ways in which we cultivate love with a partner, and the more that we experience, the more we do that, we experience deeper and deeper level experience of pleasure, and this is level 2 pleasure. And these are levels because, in a certain sense, they're qualitatively deeper, and we're willing at every subsequent higher level, we are willing to kind of give up the previous level because the higher level is so alluring, so appealing, so beautiful that it makes the lower levels less appealing. So that's why they're in a kind of a levels form. They're not just tastes of pleasure, but there's a relationship between them, right? And so we look from level 2 pleasure, we go to level 3 pleasure. Level 3 pleasure is standing for a cause, productivity, something kind of doing something for the sake of something else, something larger. right? And many of us are part of causes, right? We give to charity, we go to social justice events, um, or it's even, for the sake of a company that we work for an organization, for our church, right? We give, kind of serve something larger, and that gives such great pleasure. People go to war and die for that pleasure, right? And give up their lives for that pleasure. They actually give up their homes, their loved ones, even the experience of physical pleasure, right? And they say, I'm going to go serve my country. And they literally give up, potentially, all the other pleasures, right? Because that level 3 pleasure is so profound and so alluring that, of course, we don't want to actually die for a pleasure like that. We want to live for it, as Marc often says. We want to actually give of ourselves to that larger pleasure. And the unique self emergence process, again, actually helps us discern. Let's say we're engaged in multiple groups and initiatives. We actually become self reflective about what's really mine to do, and what am I doing just because of habit or just because someone else told me to, or I think I'm supposed to, right? So actually discernment of what is the nature of the kind of cause I am supporting, and how can I be deliberate and intentional with that cause, right? And if we're at a company, that's part of this unique self-emergence process. Let's say I'm working at a company, and I actually ask myself, well, what is the cause of this company that I'm here to serve? And does it really fill me with pleasure? And if it doesn't, that's a litmus test that maybe I don't belong here anymore. Maybe my time has come to an end and I have to move on. Or let's say, or not. Maybe it's I haven't actually looked enough. Maybe I have this fantasy that I'm supposed to be doing something else, but in reality, I haven't realized that that something else is actually right here in front of me at the company I work for, at the organization I'm part of, that I can see that cause is actually meaningful. I don't have to be, in my case, I used to do international development. I lived in exotic, faraway places, Nigeria, Peru. I went through all Central American countries, and there was this experience of so much pleasure at this cause that I was serving. But at some point, it started to break down, and I realized it was destroying me, and I was unable to experience that pleasure. The experience of that pleasure became less and less, which was a sign for me that I needed to go back home, recover, stabilize, get healthy, reintegrate into my culture. And then eventually I found a company, for-profit company, that I thought was a dead end. I was thinking to myself, this is a waste, like I lost all purpose in my life, and I'm working for this mundane, industrial supply company. But it wasn't until I was able to see that my life's purpose actually was perfectly fulfilled at this company that I was able to experience pleasure walking in the door every day. And I still work with that company. Now they're in a client relationship. I don't work for them, but I work with them. But it was a radical transformation of my identity to be able to say, to walk into this company that I thought was meaningless for me, and actually find it was actually precisely the perfect cause for my life at that time. So that's only level 3, though. We're only halfway there. When we get to, what could it possibly be that's more pleasurable than that? Can you think about it? Can you think about that? What's more pleasurable than giving yourself to a higher cause? Well, what's more pleasurable than giving yourself to a higher cause is what we call the gnosis of knowledge, wisdom about the nature of reality. So knowing the true nature of reality. And the most immediate way that we do that is to know our true self. And who is your true self? Who is my true self? It's the same one true self. It's the experience that at my essence, I am radically woven into the fabric of the unified field of reality. That actually all my personal specific identity, my egoic identity, is simply a temporal phenomenon. It's sort of an illusion that I'm separate, that in reality, the deeper truth, even that cause that I think I'm supposed to be doing, it's it's um, it's a speck of dust in the field of reality that's a unified field of love and wisdom and compassion. And so when I can step out of this attachment to my skin encapsulated ego and feel myself connected with something larger, and not a cause, but the very fabric of reality itself, that has no boundary, that has no limit, that has no end, that has no time, that has no place, that is all places at all times and no places at no time at the same time, this paradoxical, mysterious, let's just say quantum field, but it's also everything that's not quantum, it's all that is, that I'm part of that field. Wow, the pleasure of that, right? That is pleasure. And if you've ever been on a retreat, or if you've ever been on a psychedelic that brought you to that place, or if you've ever been kind of deep in meditation or in a ecstatic sexual experience, or ecstatic dancing, or in nature, and you sort of felt yourself just like open up to this magnificent, unified, transcendent, yet immanent reality, you know what I'm talking about. Okay? And as part of the Unique Self Emergence process, we spend an entire module on this level of pleasure, true self pleasure. And we actually go through 3 different doorways: the first person doorway, the second person, you and me, I, thou, beloved, and the third person, the intelligence and the magical miraculousness of reality. If that didn't make any sense to you, you can drop it. The whole point is that at level 4 pleasure, we basically we realize that I am all that is. I am one with everything that is. That all this stuff that I experience arising in my consciousness, it's just that stuff that's arising in my consciousness. But I am not attached to any of that stuff. So think about that. And then when we realize this, we start to be like, wait a minute. The entire field is coursing with pleasure. The experience of accessing the field, the one unified field, is the experience of pleasure. And that pleasure was always present all along, from, in all of my relationships and my physical pleasure, standing for a cause. All those pleasures are actually an expression of this one field of pleasure. And we can access that together. Wow. And you'd think, well, where else can you go? Like, that's the end all be all. Like, what more pleasure could there possibly be than that? Well, there's 2 more levels. So hold on to your seats. Level 5, a pleasure that people are willing to actually let go of, and I've done that myself, to experience this higher level of pleasure, and it kind of brings tears to my eyes because of the painful transition of letting go, but then realizing that's what I really wanted. But the pleasure of level 5 is the pleasure of creativity as your unique self. So in a certain sense, it's a pinnacle of this unique self-emergence process, when we realize that I am not only one with this field, but I am a unique expression, an individuated, unique perspective of this field of love and intelligence and pleasure, that it manifests uniquely as me, as my unique perspective, all my unique perception of reality. It's God having a unique experience. It's my unique way of being in the world, my unique way of living, loving, and laughing, as Marc often says, my unique poem to sing, to write, my unique gifts that I have to give to the world, my unique kind of configuration of masculine and feminine qualities, this sort of unique gender quality. When I'm able to step into my embodied, individuated, unique self, after having realized at least a glimpse of true self, this true gnosis, then the pleasure, it actually fills my entire being. It's a fullness, right? The pleasure of true self, oftentimes you certainly feel it in your entire being, but oftentimes it feels like the body is transcended. It can be. It's more nuanced than that. But at level 5 here, the body is fully inhabited, and my unique energy, my unique pleasure, my unique delight actually is expressed. And so, and you know, I used to meditate a lot more than I do now. Spent many years meditating an hour or more a day, and I experienced deep, profound, uh, kind of ecstatic release into the ultimate, into the love that held me in every second. But it wasn't until I actually met Marc, and he, through his teachings, actually gave me access to the totality of my being and becoming in the world, that I was actually able to fully inhabit my sense of self, but not from a place of shame, not from a place of contraction or smallness, but from a place of my greatness, my unique greatness. So one way to look at this is think back to a time in your life when you felt like you were totally in the flow of your life, like you were kind of being lived by something larger, that you weren't thinking too much, or you weren't trying too hard, it wasn't effortful, but you actually just like kind of almost naturally expressed the unique gift that you had to give to someone who needed it. Think about that, when that was. And think about the immense pleasure that you experienced. I experience this often in when I teach Aikido, when I teach anything, when I teach Aikido for one, I fill up with aliveness. My mind is open, my awake, my heart is open, my body is attuned to what's going on. It's like I'm being lived by something larger, right? It happens when I'm facilitating, it happens when I'm coaching, right? I actually feel like this is what I'm here to do, and it's not a cause. See that? It's not a cause. It's actually my irreducibly unique destiny, if you will. It's, let's say, you could say it's a cause of one. It's my unique cause, but it's a cause that's ever evolving, dynamic, and emerging throughout the whole course of my life. So unique self-emergence process helps us shine more brightly in the world and feel the reality that our lives matter infinitely, and that we matter, and that we're welcome in the universe. And it hurts. I'm almost crying right now thinking about the people I know that don't realize that, and how uh, they struggle to find meaning and purpose in their everyday life, and they struggle to love themselves, and struggle to find coherence in their own life, and struggle to make sense of their own needs and desires and unique perspective. And I just would love to just embrace them with this realization and the pleasure that comes from it. But that's only level 5. There's one more. What could be more beautiful, ecstatic, pleasurable than that pleasure of the creativity of living my unique self? Well, there's more. The pleasure that's more pleasurable, that's more profound and more alluring, is the pleasure of knowing that my unique gift and my unique transformation, it actually transforms the entire thing, and it participates in the evolution of everything that is. Let me just say that in a slightly different way. Level 6 pleasure is the pleasure of participating in the evolution of all that is, the evolution of love, contributing my unique gifts to the evolution of, let's just say, our species, but not just our species, everything that is. And if I dare, might say, the evolution of God. Did he just say the evolution of God? Yeah, he did. Maybe I won't go into that right now, but let's just say for a moment that it puts it into a whole new context. When it's not just right here and now, this is my unique gift to give, this is my unique gift to give, this is my unique gift to give, but when we realize that, wait a minute, there's a larger story that I'm participating in. So my life takes on infinitely greater value and meaning and purpose than even just realizing my unique self. It also, there's in a certain sense a deep duty or obligation that I have to give my gifts to meet that need, because it's almost like all of reality is desperately waiting for me to give my gifts so that thing could continue to evolve. It's like the gears need my lubricant, if I could use that weird analogy, so that the machine keeps running. Although the machine metaphor is not a great metaphor. It's more like the ecosystem needs my unique niche in order for the whole thing to be vibrant and flourishing and growing and alive. Okay? And so it's a dynamic thing. The way I do that and the way we do practice that in this unique self-coaching program is every single day, long story short, we discern at the very beginning, what is my unique self? Something we get to right at the very beginning. What am I being called toward? What am I deeply longing for? Okay? And then once we have that image, that affirmation, let's say, that metaphor, every day we wake up, we look at our day and we say, where is there an opportunity to show up as my unique self today? And then we use all of our faculties of imagination, of creativity, right, of love, of embodied feeling to imagine what would it be like if I showed up in that moment as my unique self. How might respond to the call? And I tell you, this is daily pleasure. I mean, it's a practice of choosing pleasure, that we can actually cultivate it. That's one of the biggest takeaways from Dr. Marc's teachings on pleasure, is that pleasure is a skill. And the pleasure of living my unique self is a skill that I can practice. It's not magic, although it feels magical sometimes. It's not merely grace or some sort of accident, but rather I participate in it. So from my side, I can cultivate it, I can practice, I can train myself to perceive that pleasure. Okay? And so you see, there's fractals of pleasure, and kind of from the most physical to the most cosmic, if you will. And we are always participating in various levels of pleasure, so that the extent to which we can consciously show up in each of these levels is the extent to which we wake up and we live a full life and feel love and joy and meaning and purpose. So I hope that makes sense, and if it doesn't make sense, forget about it. Feel it. I hope you felt something through that. And if you feel allured and attracted to it, I hope that you find your way to me or to someone that's facilitating this unique self process. I hope that you find your way to these teachings. Or I hope that if you know someone that would be ripe for this kind of thing, that you would refer them to me or to these teachings, so that there's a way out and a way through. Not a way out per se. A way out of one's narrow, contracted, small self, and a way through to my evolutionary unique self, so that I can fully live in the world. So I know that was a long video, and I hope that you got this far. And there's so many nuances, and maybe I'll somehow do another video on all the nuances, or maybe I'll do a class, or maybe I'll just do a specific kind of coaching program using these pleasure principles. And I'd love comments, questions, challenges, critiques. I'd love to be able to respond and dialogue through all this. So thanks for listening, and much love.